Hey guys, today's video is going to be one I've been meaning to do for a while now. I haven't done a video on a book for some time, plus this one was written by another friend of mine some time ago. When I first learned she had written and published this book, I was keen on obtaining it to read it for myself. Fantasy is one of my favorite fictional genres. I grew up on the movie franchises like The Chronicles of Narnia, which sparked a deep love and fascination with magic. Dragons, of course, are the icons of fantasy and legends in our world. Their stories emerging from nearly every continent across so many cultures through thousands of years, and their presence is something that hopefully will never cease. Erin Wedemeyer worked to honor their legacy with her book, The Vow to Fury. To be clear, this is the first addition to this novel, so any of the plot, character, and world-building details I'm going to go over could be changed in the new version she's working on. There were some fascinating matters woven into the story and characters, some surprises and elements that gave additions to dragon-focused fiction that I haven't seen much of before, or at all. It varies from the best of my memory. I hope to go over this first edition of her book to the best of my ability. Sorry if I mispronounce or mess up or misunderstand any details, Erin. The story follows the life of Rapana, a devout worshipper of the dragons who are or were considered gods by the indigenous peoples of the region the story takes place in. She comes across a wounded mother dragon, first one seen by native tribal eyes in centuries. The dragon, whose name we never learn, makes the young girl promise to take care of the one egg she can sneak away from the invading force, occupying the region who have raided and destroyed much of the land and people for the past 5 centuries by this point in the story. Rapana desperately tries to protect the egg, which holds the potential for a fire-breathing dragon, a dragon that hadn't even been seen by its own kind for centuries. However, taking this egg put her tribe, the Otami, in grave danger as the greedy invader king Zaitan and his mysterious magical advisor, War, sought to obtain permanent superhuman powers, including eternal life. Zaitan and War had spent the past 5 centuries capturing, breeding, and slaughtering dragons for their body parts to make potions to enhance themselves and prolong their lives. Rapana sought to ensure this egg's survival and the eventual re-emergence of the dragon species for them to take their place as the tribe's rightful gods and protectors. Through Ray's journey, she gains allies, some more likely than others, and struggles to free her home from the malevolent forces at work and to restore the natural balance to her world. Rapana is an interesting young heroine whom we see as an underdog character. The closest character I can compare her to is Naru from the 2022 movie Prey. Her confidence and rebellious nature are key elements to Rapana's character and her actions from beginning to end. There is another character I can compare her to, Daenerys Targaryen, when she was written correctly. Rapana could claim a similar title since she also became a mother to a dragon at the end of the book. Rapana's character and beliefs tie into the innate power within dragons and the influence they can have over the world. Like Naru and Daenerys, she boldly challenged the norms of her society and sought to prove herself to the people of her world and change it in one way or another. From wanting to become a hunter to wanting to bring down the cruel rule of Zaitan, Rapana fought and clawed through every step of her journey to bring about the change in the world she desired. She endured pain on her path, yet in the end triumphed against one of her world's greatest enemies. Delving into the dragons of this novel, the world building and design of these beings is something I wanted to understand as best as I could, along with the rest of the novel. I needed to reread your book a couple of times, Erin. Apologies about that. Their physical designs was something I was surprised to grasp in terms of size and body proportions. I did some Googling while typing up the script for my review. I noted some interesting size scaling. To keep it to the point, I'm picturing a dragon about the size of perhaps an Allosaurus with the wings of a fairly large pterosaur. To say this sounds like a formidable design is an understatement, though part of me admittedly wonders if the wingspan is a little short for the dragon's size, though it's still a very physically imposing creature. I also saw some nods to some of the main gods from Mesoamerica, like Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl, with the feathers we see on parts of the designs of these dragons. I would suggest, Erin, if that's alright, perhaps in your revised version that you physically design the dragons considerably more like them, though I do see how that could be cultural appropriation, and I know that's not what you intend with the story. The feathered serpent, a symbolism and the role of the entity or entities. I'm not wise enough to truly know the scale of such divinity, something that holds such invaluable importance within this book. The dragons were the guardians of this fantasy world and the protectors of the tribes and forests. Much like the Mayan and Aztec gods they are connected to, dragons of a vow to fury present within what people like Rapana have faith in and the greater web of life. Other cultures around the world have connected dragons with divinity. Some dragons are gods, or as close to gods as a being can get, or even greater, depending on the stories and faith. This isn't to say the dragons in the books weren't criticized or questioned. The greatest example of this was by a dragon herself, Jade to be specific though. She felt that her kind being perceived and worshipped as divine made dragons too arrogant and vain. She thought people, dragon or human, should act within having faith in themselves. This can be connected to reality where no god from any religion or faith, past or present, has ever been exempt from criticism in any number of different ways. It is interesting and heartfelt near the end, even though Rapana sees that the dragons aren't omnipotent, but they still can act in a way deserving respect. Fury, the dragon who hatched from the egg, was the one to save her from the tyrannical Titan at the end. Even though she noted she couldn't worship such a hatchling, she still was grateful to him for saving her life. Though the egg wouldn't have survived if it weren't for her, it was her sense of loyalty to the dragons and her blood that led to the change. This does connect to how the story both connects to old faiths and traditions while changing at the same time and or recognizing greater truths. Rapana fought against the Otami tradition of women just being berry pickers by desiring to be a hunter and acting on it. She also at the same time held fast to the ancestral faith of dragon worship, though eventually coming to see them in a more nuanced way, I guess you could say. Now taking a turn in this review, I want to discuss some of the other characters. Mikili, for a while, was a serious douchebag, and revealed at the end by his mother, kinda full of shit, sorta. This doesn't detract from what happened in his final minutes in the story. He, in the end, fought for something greater than himself, and was one of the catalysts for the eventual downfall of Titan. He was a serious irritant for Rapana for most of the story. It just took time for things to grow for the better, as she challenged him and he realized how badly he treated her before his death, then was forgiven. Though I do agree with you, Erin, she should have knocked his ass out more than once. To others, what part of this means, I'll get into later. With Pieria, we see the results of a cruel caste system and how hardship can shape someone who feels so out of place. Even Moir recognized that Ray, Mikili, and Kino treated the young half-elf better than the elves themselves. Granted, it was confirmed the animal-connected elves actually had sympathy for her. They did act on this for the girl to have a better life except for Moria. This part being largely because of what happened with her sister and the guilt that no doubt hated her for not doing something for her. Pieria eventually gained confidence within herself with her time with the young natives by wishing to prove herself, though ultimately mostly to herself. And without her, it's possible the group never would have gotten as far as they did. As for Kino, kinda like Mikili, he was kinda a douche sometimes, though he did show compassion for Pieria, being the first one to speak out about her poor treatment. He did seek to free his brother and others of the Kakato tribe that were enslaved. Unfortunately, he believed the wrong man and nearly doomed the future of his world. I do recognize that many probably would have done the same or similar because he felt more loyalty to his brother and people than to the dragons. Though I could only imagine how his brother reacted when he learned what he did and what it almost cost. I also wonder whether the matter of the sacrifice that Kino remembered using a group of the Casparalos who left their society because they hated Titan might be altered. That was a terrifying addition that I imagine might hold greater significance in the revised version, since he didn't inform the other characters about it. Moir was just a cunning man and had been playing his game for a long time. Before we get into the vengeful half-elf, I will go over Titan. The man is a clear representation of the conquistador that invaded the lands of Mesoamerica and the cruelties and sense of superiority that tie in with it. There were some parts that weren't totally evil, given what happened to his wife at the hands of a Kakato chieftain in the prologue. He did genuinely love her. I can compare it to Silas from The Legend of Vox Machina, a horrible man that had a true love for his wife. His form of revenge did unfortunately take the form of literally enslaving members of that tribe for centuries and ultimately aimed at literally committing genocide. Him also having the women that were picked to be his wives over the years afterwards murdered because he loved his wife was just vile. I am surprised though he didn't try to have Moir find a way to bring her back to life with his magic so they could have eternity together instead of just him and Moir. Titan, I feel, ultimately cared most about his own ego and sense of self-importance, despite him believing he would have sacrificed his life for his wife when she was alive. I could be wrong though, it's just how I perceive it. Moir felt a similar way about the man, seeing him as an arrogant fool to manipulate and use for his own ends. The half-elf though also was a victim of prejudiced societies in one form or another. The elves and their belief in racial purity and superiority, and the Kakato looking down on him for being blind. Though with Titan he creates another cruel society fueled by the suffering of natives and dragons, with the latter having the young being destined for slaughter to be used to empower himself and Titan. With Moir, it's unfortunately the case of the abused becoming the abuser and worse, unlike Zidon, who was xenophobic and megalomaniacal from the start. Queen Vanima does inform Rey about the changes the war with the Kasparolos has changed beliefs and perceptions within Elven society. One just wonders if it might be too late given all the pain that had occurred till then. Shifting away, I do want to talk about the writing and narration style in this novel. The fourth wall breaking is something I'm not sure I've seen in a story like this before. The first time I read the book, and recently reread it for the first time, it caught me off guard to say the least. It's an interesting approach to storytelling. In some ways, it presents a greater in-depth look into the tale being told. I can compare it to how in movies you have the commentary option to listen to while watching the movie. It gives a deeper look into the story from the perception and understanding of the ones who created it. Admittedly, I can't remember if you utilized this style in our creative writing fiction class years ago, Erin. Apologies about that. I'm curious to see if you'll utilize this again in the revised version of Avowed of Fury and your other future works. Not saying you should or shouldn't do it, I was kind of speechless at this for a while. I do have some thoughts about different elements of what you created that I just offer as suggestions. One thing I did mention earlier was the designs of the dragons, perhaps drawing on art styles and incarnations of the feathered serpent, and more than just having feathers at the end of the tails. Have them reflect the realm they live in and the inspirations and original stories of the world your story is based on. I also would suggest the environment reflect the severe results of the loss of most of the dragons, even though these are hard to read and write, emotionally speaking. Greater deforestation, the possible near extinction of other species, the tribes being continuously forced to convert to the religion of the Kasparolos, leading to public examples of the native faith being assaulted and cruelly denounced, and when those don't convert, they're beaten and butchered. Since this depicts how the worst of Christianity near totally destroyed Mesoamerica, that goes with the same mindset to everywhere else in the world, etc. In contrast, I think seeing the presence of dragons in nature and their, I guess you could say, aura affects the world. When the tiger nearly killed Rey and McKeely, the big cat should have found the dragon egg. Instead of how a predator would act when finding an egg, we could have seen a sign of instinctual respect and perhaps reverence for it. Having one of the most formidable animals show such consideration and arguable humility to just an egg present the spiritual links dragons have to the forest. Perhaps drawing on another nature guardian, the Leshy, would be a way of crafting the deeper connections dragons have with their world. I would also suggest giving more in-depth examples of their prowess, both physical and magical. Not saying to make them invincible, as that would go against the narrative of the story. I just sometimes wonder if some of the scenes briefly detailing the deaths and fall of the dragons could have been more fleshed out. Another thing I'm curious about is the names and languages used in this story. While I won't say online engines are the most useful method of pinpointing the origins, it was surprising. The names Rapana, Makili, Kino, Kasima, and Moir aren't Mesoamerican in origin or influence from what I can find, though don't take this as certainty. My own personal research is no substitute for someone who has studied such languages and cultures to great extents. I did recognize that some names do have origins in some indigenous roots, example Kahuna. Some of the words used in the languages not written in English range from what my limited research can find, from Arabic to Sanskrit, etc. Not saying this was bad, I was just interested to see what inspired these words. I'm curious to hear how you designed the languages. This first edition to Avowed of Fury is a unique story that has some definite unique twists added to the fantasy genre and created an original tale to tell. The Mesoamerican style setting, the complex matters of indigenous belief and conflict with colonization and prejudice really built upon the world building. We do see the nuances of the tribal societies as well. Rapana struggles against her traditional gender norms of the Otami and seeks to break free of that, though we see herself empowered by her ancestral faith, which is what drives her to become the greatest catalyst for the change that was needed for her world to heal and change for the better. The dragon's narrative and actual presences both help shape the world that the story takes place in. The mother dragon, Jade, grandeur, and fury shape the actual presence, thus presenting the complexities of draconic nature and how they view themselves along with their relationships to the world. The narrative presence is incredibly immense given that it's what drives Rapana in large part to care for the egg and to honor the wish of the mother dragon, along with wishing to free the tribes of the Kasparolos and return her people to their original faith. Admittedly, some characters got my attention more than others, and I can definitely see Rapana and her personal story as comparable in different ways to Naru and Daenerys Targaryen. She was the heart of the story, after all, and a dragon's heart knows neither fear nor doubt. This was something Rapana had to remind the world, including even to the dragons, about. I want to give a special thanks to the author Erin Wedemeyer for her story being the subject of this video. I'd be interested to discuss this story in its future revision and more with you in the future if possible. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see y'all next time.